Crysis is finally playable after 15 years. Cyberpunk's developers are making a big announcement, DICE fixed Battlefront 2, and much more on Today in Gaming. Hey guys, LevelCap here, and it only took 15 years to make Crysis playable. Well, not exactly, but at least perform well. The latest update for Crysis Remastered finally fixed the historic title's long-standing CPU performance bottleneck. When Crytek announced Crysis Remastered, fans of the franchise were incredibly excited to finally have a version of the game that runs well. The remaster launched on PC in late 2020. It featured many enhancements and new tech like ray tracing, but it still ran poorly thanks to CPU bottlenecks. Crysis originally launched in 2007, and at that time, Crytek bet that future CPUs would have ultra-fast cores at over 5 or even 6 gigahertz. Obviously, that bet did not pan out for them, and the game was notoriously difficult to run even on modern PCs that went for multi-core versus faster CPU clock rates. Despite that misstep, the game was still a landmark release featuring technology and rendering systems that had never been seen before in a game. Screen space ambient occlusion, parallax occlusion mapping, advanced character rendering, volumetric clouds, and more were all featured that either debuted with Crysis or were made popular by it. You could certainly credit Crysis with moving the visual needle forward for the entire game industry. Now, the most recent update for the remaster has finally fixed the game's performance issues. It addressed CPU and GPU performance, stability, texture streaming, and much more. In short, you can expect up to 80% more FPS in many areas and substantial improvements throughout the entire game compared to how it performed at launch. Crytek have done a fantastic job with this update. Players with high-end PCs can still push their hardware to the absolute limit with the remaster, but people running on essentially normal, basic systems can still enjoy the classic game without having to get a supercomputer. One thing left uncertain about the future of Crysis is how demanding the upcoming fourth game will be. Crytek's remasters of the original trilogy offer glimpses at the modern tech, but they're also limited by the games that they're based on. Short of a complete remake, there's only so much they can do with a remaster. Crytek are surely going to push the envelope even further with Crysis 4. The "Can It Run Crysis" meme may no longer be applicable to the original game, but there's no telling what Crytek are cooking up to melt our PCs for the next 15 years. Cyberpunk 2077's developers might also have a transformative update to reveal soon. CD Projekt Red just announced a live stream event scheduled for tomorrow. They announced it on Cyberpunk's official Twitter account, but didn't indicate what the stream was going to be about. That said, we can make a few assumptions. First and foremost, you can probably expect the release date for 2077's next-gen console update. This upgrade is rumored to be much more than a simple resolution or FPS boost. Leaks and reports suggest a total relaunch of the game that adds tons of missing features, content, and improvements. It's also likely that we'll finally get some info about the game's upcoming DLC. Cyberpunk is supposedly getting at least 2 major expansions and a standalone multiplayer experience. However, the game's launch disaster forced CD Projekt Red to make massive operational changes to ensure that future updates would be high quality but take longer to release. As an example of these changes, leaker and passionate gamer Tyler McVicker says devs working on 2077's next-gen upgrade told studio heads it wasn't ready to launch and that they listened. It was supposed to launch late last year but was pushed back to give devs more time. Had the studio not made the internal changes, they probably would have launched the next-gen upgrade with significant bugs, likely putting a huge damper on its success. Ultimately, Cyberpunk is in a much better place today than it was at launch, but it's still not quite the defining RPG of a generation like CD Projekt Red had promised, and that could be due to a lot of those missing features and content that we're supposedly getting with the next-gen upgrade. Hopefully the game finally lives up to its full potential. The upgrade will be free for existing owners of the game. Stay tuned for more info tomorrow. DICE are finally doing something about exploits ruining Star Wars Battlefront 2 multiplayer. For the past few months, players have been dealing with various exploits that break the game. The most notable one is a glitch that gives everyone in a match 1 HP but makes them invincible. Last week, they released an update that attempted to address the exploits, but apparently that patch didn't fix everything. They're doing some server maintenance today to hopefully iron out the issue for good. Battlefront 2's launch was certainly one of the bigger disasters in the company's history, but DICE turned things around and now it's considered one of the best multiplayer games the franchise has ever offered. It's unfortunate to see these sorts of exploits ruining an otherwise stellar experience. Crossfire X launched to many negative reviews last week, with the majority complaining about bugs, balance issues, and performance problems. A producer on the game took to social media apologizing for the launch, saying that they feel like they betrayed the trust of our players. He promises that major improvements to stability and balance are coming. Now, if you've never heard of Crossfire before, well, you might be surprised to hear that it's one of the biggest FPS games in the world. It originally launched in 2007 and was basically a Counter-Strike clone for Korean players. And it's since become the world's most played game with 1 billion total users since launch. It spawned a media empire of games, a TV show, an upcoming movie, and more. Crossfire X is the latest game in the franchise and is an Xbox exclusive title. The single player was developed by Remedy, the studio behind Control and Alan Wake, and Crossfire's original studio Smilegate developed the multiplayer. And despite that blockbuster pairing, reviews of Crossfire X are in the gutter. It's unclear if improving weapon balance and fixing bugs will even help. Many reviews paint the game as a microtransaction-laden mess with an okay single player and unfinished multiplayer experience. Kung Fu brawler Sifu is getting new accessibility features like difficulty modes in a future update. The game has been very well received across the board for its emphasis on precise combat and punishing boss fights, but many players are getting stumped by the game's second level. The developers say difficulty modes that make the game easier are coming. These difficulty modes will also include options to make the game even harder than it already is. There's no ETA on these updates, but you can expect them reasonably soon. GameBeat editor Jeff Grubb claims a Goldeneye 007 remaster will be announced in the next couple of weeks by Microsoft. The game is an HD re-release of the classic N64 title. Last year, an Xbox Live Arcade build of the game leaked online. The project was cancelled before the devs could finish it, but 90% of the game is there. The leak prompted speculation that a proper remaster was in the works, and more recently, new achievements for Goldeneye popped up on the Xbox database. Grubb is most likely onto something here. He's considered an industry insider and often makes claims about future titles with a decent degree of accuracy. The upcoming Russian post-apocalyptic sci-fi FPS Atomic Heart finally has a release date. Well, sort of. The developers announced an official release window for the game in late 2022. And in case you can't tell by the trailers, there's a big emphasis on eye candy. Early trailers showed a mixed bag of stunning visuals, poor performance, clunky combat, and an intriguing backstory. The new trailer is much more polished and features new music by the legendary game composer Mick Gordon, who did Doom 2016 and Eternal. Atomic Heart will offer NVIDIA's RTX ray tracing features. It looks like a blend of Far Cry and Fallout with cutting-edge graphics and BioShock Infinite style combat. Season 2 of the Warzone and Vanguard integration just launched. Warzone players will find several new additions to the Battle Royale. The new Nebula V ammo prevents down players from being revived. AI enemies have been added to the map to protect higher tier loot areas. A bomber plane has been added that's designed to counter vehicles. There's a handful of new locations to explore, like a chemical factory and underground chemical weapons lab. The number of tweaks, bug fixes, and balance changes are honestly too many to mention in a single news video, but pretty much every facet of the game has been adjusted, from weapon balance to lighting on Caldera. Before we get to our final story today, I just wanted to remind you to consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps the channel out and ensures that you're in the loop with every new video. Lost Ark is officially the second most played Steam title ever. It beat out Dota 2 and CSGO with a whopping 1,324,000 concurrent players less than 24 hours after its official launch. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds record is about double that though, so it still has a lot of catching up to do if it wants to take the top spot. Lost Ark is a free-to-play MMO that originally debuted in 2019 for South Korea. It was published in the EU and America by Amazon on the 11th and is proving to be a massive hit with players. In fact, the game is so popular, Amazon are deploying an entirely new server region just to handle the load. And that wraps it up for today in gaming. As always, guys, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.